Okay, wanted to go over your first stages in, starting to set your models up. And there's two states that you can go through. One of them's called boxing and one's called blocking, okay? And students kind of get this confused. A lot of times they think they're blocking, which is what they're really doing is boxing. Boxing is where you're making a very crude shape really quick. Shouldn't take you very long to do your initial boxing to get just the basic shapes of things down, okay? And so we're going to be doing this tire. And this is what I get from students, okay? They'll initially just build me a little cylinder of this for boxing, okay? Which is okay. You're getting the basic shape, and it's okay. I think this is a lazy way to do it. Why is it all faceted? Why are you making it faceted when you're creating it? And students will go, well, isn't it just for boxing? And which is fine. Yeah, you can do that. I happen to be kind of somebody who likes to work at a higher state. And so to me, this is, crude. Okay. So, the reason students do this is because that's what these settings default to. They default to 18 sides, and, students have a tendency to let the computer control you instead of you control what's going on. So, what I would have a tendency to do, this is what I get from students, but what I'd have a tendency to do is to come in here and actually put in 60 sides in here so that it's smoother. That took, a couple of clicks to do that. And I also added a cap segment in here because I'm going to box in this, wheel that's in here too. I want a little bit of an inset in there. So I'll come in here and just extrude that in. It takes just a second to do that, to just give me a little bit of feel of that. The other thing that I would have a tendency to do at this point is I would, make sure I didn't have these subdivisions in there. They don't really add anything to it. And then I would come back and probably chamfer these edges really quick. Gives me something like that. Okay. And this has much more of kind of a close flavor to that than, the first thing, So from this to that, I think there's quite a bit of difference. To me, I'd rather look at this. And the difference was, the first one took 10 seconds to do, and this took all of like 20 seconds to do to take it to this state. So that's what I'd have a tendency to do. But this is what students, think this is blocking. And to me, that's still just boxing. I'm just getting the basic shape. Okay, so I'm going to take you through me actually blocking this. Okay, so the first thing I would have a tendency to do is to come in, and I'm thinking about these treads. And so I'll just draw it from the top view, kind of the shape of that tread. Okay, so I kind of draw that, and I'm just doing splines. You can do this with pulling polys too, but I just work in splines. And then I come in and I will just chamfer a couple of those just to make it a little bit closer to what's going on. And, these are all corners. I'm going to do corners on those. So when I come in, I'm going to dump a quantify mesh on it to give it to a mesh. Now, sometimes I don't do this, but in this case, I'm going to need to bend these. So I need some subdivisions in here. And so that's kind of a gnarly mesh in there. That's at the default settings of 4. So I just came in here and cooked that up to 5. And now that's kind of a nice flow of geometry. And so this is a really quick way to be able to get something that I can be pliable and to bend. Okay. So next thing I do is to come in. I know I'm going to need 2 of these, so there's one on this side and one on that side. So I'm just using the mirror tools and mirroring one over there. So I have 2. And then what I'm going to do is I need to center the pivot point. So I'm going to come in here, effect pivot only, attach these 2 together so it's one, because I'm going to bend these, and I want to bend them right from the middle. So I attach them together as one thing and then move the pivot to the center. Okay. After I do that, I kind of was looking at this and realized that these edges needed to be straight. They weren't, so I just came in here and grabbed the edges and made those straight real quick. And so then the next thing I need to do is kind of just block in the basics of the tire itself. Okay. And so I'm just using a torus. Okay. Simple torus in here. And, it defaults to 12 sides and 24 segments, which is, kind of crude. So I come back in here and just give me 60 segments. And then I'll come in here and kind of look at it from the top and see what my scale is according to my treads that I'm putting in here. And I'll scale this if I need to get it the way I want it. And I need some more sides in here. So I'll dial up some more sides. I'm using 40 in here just to make it a little bit smoother. And then, actually, this tire is kind of fat, so I'm coming in here and selecting these faces on the backside here, and I'm going to detach those, but I'm going to attach them as an element so they stay as part of this object because I'm going to come back in and bridge them together. So here I'm just moving them straight out, and then I come back and selecting, the borders, and then using a bridge and putting a bridge in there to bridge those back together. Okay, so then I got a fatter tile like this, and so then I'll go back and just realign it a little bit to make sure everything is exactly the way I want it, and scale it a little bit. I want these treads to be out a little bit because once I bow, they'll pull back in a little bit into the tire. So that's pretty close to proportions that I need. So the next thing I'll do is come in and I center this to the world. Now the reason I'm going to center this tire to the world is because I'm going to use an array tool to array those around, and it's easiest if you just array around the center of the world. So I just zero it out. So all these down here, my XYZs down here at the bottom are all zeroed out. Okay, so then I come in from the side and I want to bend this. Okay, so there is the, my little tread, and so I'll come in and put a bend modifier on it. So I'm just putting a bend modifier. Then it'll take you a second to figure out which axis you need to bend it on. In my case, Y was the axis, but it was still kind of bending the wrong way, and so I needed to rotate the direction, which needed to be a minus 90 degrees, and then I was able to get it to bend the way I wanted it to bend. Okay. So then I put a shell modifier on that to give it some thickness, and I'm just letting this penetrate in. I don't really care because it's just a blocking state, so I'm not trying to cut this in or anything. And so there we go. That's pretty much what it looks like. And then I'm going to do an array with it. Okay, so that's under tools here, pull down to array, and that'll bring in your array tools. And then you'll have to figure out which axis. So you click on rotate, you'll have to figure out Z axis, Y axis. In my case, it was the Y axis. I hit preview, and then they'll preview, and then you can dial in how many you need. In my case, they need to kind of touch, so it's about 30. And as I'm looking at this, I realize, those aren't thick enough. These are actually bigger, thicker. So I stopped at that point and decided, okay, I want to rework those a little bit. So I went back in and I scaled it on this axis to make it fatter. Okay. So, and then I also came in, and because I put that bridge in there, it needed to be flat here. So I put an FFD on it and just came in and kind of pulled the control points to kind of flatten it out a little bit so it matched on there just a little bit better. And then I baked that in. So that tread looked a little bit better. So then I came back in and did my array, and now that's much closer to what we wanted. And now it's just 22 count to get on there, so it's much better, much closer to what I wanted. Okay, doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just getting it a little bit closer. Okay. All right, so then I just go ahead and let the array happen, and then I attach them all together as one thing, and so I've got something that's getting really pretty close to it. I'm going to come in here and manipulate a little bit more now because I want to get this wheel in here. So I'm coming in here with a circular selection. So go up here on your selection tool and turn it into a circle. And then I can select those, and I'm just going to delete those out of there. Okay, so once I've deleted those out, now I can come in here and grab this border and start extruding in by pulling edges. Okay, so basically what I do is grab that, and I'm doing a scale to scale it in, holding the shift key down and then pushing it back, and then scaling it in, pushing it back. So this is all real quick, just holding the shift key down, scales and moves to get extra geometry in there. And then I just keep going to kind of get this shape in there, and eventually pull that back out. And so then I've got a really close shape to what I have in there. Okay, it's getting pretty close. And then I'll look at it, and it needed to be a little bit fatter, so I brought it and scaled it on the Y-axis there, so it's a little bit fatter. And the next thing I want to do is kind of bake in this flat spot in here, because this vehicle that this is on is really, really heavy, and so we want a flat spot on here. So what I've done is gone over to my Space Warps, and I've got a FFD, and I use the circular one, okay? And so you can set how many points you want. I've got 24 sides in, so I have quite a few sides in here, okay? And then I set in radial 6, so it'll have 6 divisions going this way. And then the height was 4, which I'm just going to leave. That's the default. I really don't need 4, but that's fine. Okay, so I'll set that in. Okay, the next thing I need to do is come over here and adjust my radius so that it just barely fits inside, that the tire fits inside of that. I don't want it too big, so I want it, but I want to make sure I don't get too small so all this geometry is fitting inside of it, okay? Then I'll need to go to the top and I'll need to set my height so that I adjust this so that the tire, totally fits inside of it. So I'll have to adjust the height, and so I'll get something like that. Okay, so then I'm ready. Okay, then I'll come up here to my bind tool. So you'll have to bind the space warp to the tire, and it doesn't matter whether you bind the tire to the space warp or the space warp to the tire. It doesn't really matter. You're just binding them together, and that tells it that, when I manipulate the space warp, it'll manipulate the geometry. Okay. So just to show you the difference here, I made a copy of it here without it, and now I've started manipulating all these points in, to flatten this out, and I'm manipulating it from the side too. So as this kind of thing, comes down, it's getting fatter as it sits down, and that rubber's kind of bowing out. And so you end up with something like this, and that's getting pretty close. Okay, so that's pretty close to what I want right there. Okay. Now, there is kind of a little anomaly that'll happen when you're pulling these edges, is you'll get some smoothing group issues in here. You'll see all these fastening the smoothing groups. So I just come in here real quick and select all that. All I did was select poly, and I selected that center poly, and then I just did grow till I, hitting this grow button over here until I got them all. And then I just did an auto smooth, and then it'll give me something like that to get those shading anomalies out of there. Okay. And so there you go. There's my tire. Okay, so just do a little render there, and you'll see that looks pretty good. Okay, but one of the things that's going on with this is, you're getting really sharp edges, which is fine. I mean, for the blocking stages, it's fine. But being that I'm rendering in Mental Ray, Mental Ray shader on it, it has an area in here called Special Effects where it's got a thing called Round Corners, where I can click on this and it'll kind of round these corners. I'll have to adjust the amount. And when I do that, then it will kind of round these corners. Okay, so with this on, it's only a rendering. It's not really subdividing or anything, but it's just in the rendering. And so then I have something that, is a little bit nicer. I never did this before until Mental Ray, because I would just take it to that point, using Scanline Renderer, but it's just kind of a little trick, and it kind of just makes it nice when I'm doing my beauty renders, And there you go. That's my blocking of this piece, okay, versus boxing. Okay, so there's the boxing, and then coming back later, I'll do the blocking, which looks like this. Okay, now this took me all of about 10 minutes to create this. Okay, so I'm not really worried, that this is exactly the same. I didn't count these to make it. All I really care is that I'm getting something that's a little closer to this, to the flavor of this, before I actually get into the modeling stage. Okay, so that's boxing, and this is blocking. Okay, thank you.